So thank you very much for attending the all-staff linguistic diversity public consultation. So this consultation has been put on specifically for staff members to put in their 2 cents and their opinions on the linguistic diversity policy that we are currently rewriting. So to get started on that, we have the relevant policies that are involved here. So we have the linguistic diversity policy, which is an overarching policy. It includes the Irish language policy and the Ulster Scots policy, which has language elements in them both. And so those two policies sit underneath and underneath linguistic diversity to a certain extent. Linguistic diversity is the overarching policy for those. Basically, what the linguistic diversity policy comes out as is a policy about minority language use from council to public and from public to council. So minority languages, what are those? Irish language and Ulster Scots are the first two that jump to mind, particularly in our district. However, we also include here sign language, Makaton, which is a type of sign language. It is a bit more simplified and it is a standalone sign language. So there's the Irish Sign Language, British Sign Language, and Makaton. They are separate languages. Braille is also counted as a minority language. And in this instance, linguistic diversity, we're also directing this policy towards people for whom English is not their first language. So L2 English language speakers, and it could be a case of English being their third or fourth language in some instances as well. So we have on screen here, sorry, just to make you very small, folks. We have the commitment that we have come up with. So this is a new addition to the policy. Fermanagh and Omagh District Council will enable, encourage and empower communities to learn, share and grow the language they choose to use, promote the accessibility of our services regardless of language throughout the district, and work towards meeting the needs and objectives of existing and emerging language communities and networks for residents and visitors. Therefore, that's the commitment we have decided to put as the core of this linguistic diversity policy. And if anybody wants to make notes on that and you can make comment on that towards the end of the presentation. We also then have aims for this policy. So the first aim is to establish a transparent set of principles and procedures for promoting, protecting and enhancing linguistic diversity for the benefit of the district's residents and visitors. To promote, protect and enhance linguistic diversity within the district through appropriate local actions and that reflect the rich and diverse culture of the district, its residents and visitors. To facilitate appropriate engagement with council facilities and services by residents, customers and visitors according to their linguistic needs and within available resources. We're still on aims here. To develop opportunities for residents, customers and visitors to use minority languages when accessing the council's facilities and services. To respond appropriately to local language communities in the development and integration of minority languages into mainstream civic life, and to ensure that those who face linguistic barriers, including those from minority ethnic communities, people with a disability and people with differing levels of literacy, are able to enjoy equal access to Fermanagh and Omagh District Council's goods, facilities and services. So again, those are the aims of this policy. If you have any comment on the wording or the specific aim itself, please make note of that and forward it to myself. For those who are watching the recording, you can forward that to fiona.crudden@fermanaghomagh.com. Now we move on to objectives. So we have embrace linguistic diversity in all its forms and including the encouragement of the use of minority languages in both service delivery and in civic life. For example, sign language or languages other than English. Prioritise clear communication with residents, customers and visitors who may not be fluent in either written or spoken English through easy read documents or pictogram wayfinding signage. Proactively employ alternative means of communication such as sign language. Put in place mechanisms for integrating both spoken, written and signed language forms in a way that best meets the needs of local language communities and visitors. Enhance good relations within the district through the celebration of minority languages. Promote Irish and Ulster Scots and celebrate the significance of these languages in the culture and history and culture of the district. And afford elected members the opportunity to use and access their language of choice whenever appropriate, while respecting others' identities and mindful of the Council's corporate responsibilities. That leads us on to then the key priorities. So we have ensure clear communication within the Council and residents and visitors and customers. Encourage respect for minority languages and minority language users. Increase accessibility to Council services for users of minority languages. So those are the three core and key priorities. Everything that is within the implementation plan has to have these priorities in mind and leads back to the objectives that we have in this policy as well. So the survey and public consultation. So we opened the survey and public consultation on the 12th of April, and it is due to close on the 8th of July. So it has been open for 12 weeks. We've had public meetings with lead organisations, advocacy groups, and for the public as well. And now we're having one for the staff. We plan to have this report to committee in September. If it's running late, it'll be October, but it should be before Christmas. On to discussion. Does anybody want to raise anything there?
I suppose, Fiona, I'm here on behalf of the museum service.
Yes.
So what does this mean for us in terms of the services that we provide on the ground? What do we need to start thinking about in planning what we're doing in the future?
So we might be better off with me sharing the implementation plan in order to answer that question for you.
Okay.
So hopefully that is up on everybody's screen at the minute. So it should be a Word document that's up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So the implementation plan is here, and this is kind of more for staff, that we are looking at practically what is expected of staff members and what staff members should expect from the public as well. So we've done this in a way that it leads back to the objectives, and it should also underpin those key priorities again. So as we're going through this, if anything occurs to you, please let me know. It's a very relaxed meeting here. Don't worry, I'm not going to take offence to you chiming in at any point. And hopefully this will help answer that as well, Brona, although it might be slightly later. I think it's the second objective that is more of relevance to yourself and the museum. So the first objective is embrace linguistic diversity in all its forms and including the encouragement of use of minority languages. I'm just going to make this slightly bigger so everybody can see. So Council will improve facilitation of minority language speakers throughout Council services, including registrations. And in this instance, we have the use of all the different marks that languages use. So the acute, if anybody studied French or Spanish, acute, grave, tilde, and cedella, they're all within those. They're all marks that you have within those languages, and sometimes they're on consonants, sometimes they're on vowels. And the FODC from the Irish language, as I'm the Irish language officer, is classed as an acute. The umlaut is, I believe, used in German and probably more widely as well, but it's the two dots above the U or the O. So it's not just registrations that this is going to be useful for. Community services, like the likes of, say, a community group that is for, just picking a minority at random here, a Bulgarian community group perhaps. If their name has some of those characters in it. Our services, whenever we're working with them, we should be able to create their name properly again if we're corresponding with them. Leisure and recreation, arts and heritage, building control, planning, waste and recycling, all of these services need to be able to have these marks as a sign of respect to the customers that we're working with. Establish a working group of council services officers to meet at a minimum biannually, as in every 6 months, to review and update implementation measures for the linguistic diversity policy. So this group will submit an annual report to council on the progress of the implementation plan. Meetings and resulting actions will be collated into an annual report to council. Accept written correspondence in other languages and reply in the relevant language where appropriate and practical. So that is, we already do that anyway. When correspondence comes in through letters or emails, we try and find out which language it's in, and then we get that translated. And when we're sending a reply, we try as best as possible to reply bilingually. In the case of it being submitted completely in Irish, we would make, because we have Irish language officers on staff, we'd make a real effort to get the reply to be completely in Irish as well. Frontline employees will be trained in procedures for dealing in an appropriate and welcoming manner with an inquiry or request in languages other than written or spoken English. So, Brona, this might tie back in, especially with the visitor centre employees who are front of house in the visitor centre. They would have global reception training, I believe, or global welcoming. I'm not too sure of the exact term there, but that training would be ongoing for any new members of staff and would be encouraged to continue. Prioritise clear communication with residents, customers and visitors who may not be fluent in either written or spoken English through easy read documents or pictogram wayfinding signage. So we wish to compile a toolkit for staff to refer to of best practice when producing printed or digital material in line with easy read recommendations from support groups such as Royal National Institute for the Blind, MenCap, etc. So this isn't just for those who have, for example, somebody who is who identifies as blind. They often need more, let's say, contrast in their texts. So and the same goes for anybody who has dementia, and we're linking in with the age-friendly officers there as well with the best practice for that. So any posters that we put in, the contrast has to be quite sharp in order to make sure that the message is getting across. Language has to be quite simple, so lots of the staff members already produce a lot of content for online or public consumption, and best practice would be try and aim it for a primary school child's level of understanding. You're using clear, concise language, and you're not bogging down in lots of little details and lots of the bigger words that we can use. When you're talking to the public, we're looking to make it as clear and as simple as possible to get your message across. Implement appropriate signage across the estate, such as wayfinding and interpretation for new developments and refurbishment. So that's something about like the interpretation panels that we put up in our outdoor centres or facilities as well. Implement appropriate signage, uniforms and stationery. We have to put that in because it's already mentioned in our branding policy that we have within the council. So we've included it here because it's already been decided. Ensure all IT systems used by the council support the diacritic marks and accents. That's what we discussed in the first point. Ensure that the council's website makes available all information in alternative languages. You may not be aware, but I'm going to tell you now, so you will be. The website, our Fermanagh Noma District Council website uses Browse Aloud. So it's the little bee with the headphones. It's a symbol, it's a kind of a floating symbol that comes up when you open the website. If you press on that, you will get either the option to have whatever text on your page needs available can be read aloud by the computer, or it can be translated into the language of your choice. It is similar to Google Translate, and we have found that sometimes it's slightly more accurate than Google Translate as well. In some instances, I can't vouch for all languages. Then we have establish a protocol for engaging interpreters when needed by residents and visitors. So this is particularly of import to anybody who is in front line and in regular contact with members of the public. So if somebody walked into a Connect Centre and they needed interpretation facilities, how would that person that's behind the desk react? So we want to put in a protocol for those people, for the staff, that they don't panic. First of all, they're well aware that they of what steps that they would have to take. And I've discussed that with Geraldine's team, and we're putting together what we think would work. And obviously that's a theory, and it's going to need a lot more input from everybody that's involved in front of house interactions. So we're looking for interactions there and more collaborative working into making that protocol something that's useful to staff instead of just a tick box exercise. We want those protocols to be useful for both staff and the customer who has walked in the door, so that they get their services quickly and without much fuss or extra stress. Proactively employ alternative means of communication such as sign language. So we are going to work in partnership with relevant bodies in order to facilitate users of minority languages and all staff to receive training and a linguistic diversity toolkit. So all those protocols will be included in the toolkit. Put in place mechanisms for integrating both spoken and written and signed language forms in a way that best meets the needs of local language communities and visitors. So provide information in alternative formats in a timely and sensitive manner where the person is not fluent in written English or cannot access written English. As a default position, continue to use universal signage based on symbols in order to facilitate those who have difficulties accessing written English in line with best practice wherever possible. For example, the signs for toilet, they're universal symbols, and they're of more use to people than written signs that in, say, 10 different languages. The pictogram symbols are very, very useful and have been used all over the place. So if you think of the symbols that are used in an airport when you're traveling, they're there for a reason, because people with all different languages can access the same information. Fermanagh Noma District Council.
Sorry, it's Dolores. Can I just add on that as well too? As I did some Alzheimer's training as well too. So it's not even about language and that, it's actually about communicating beyond the spoken word as well too. You know, that what I took away from that was how important it was to have those symbols again rather than the written word as well. So it goes even beyond the primary purpose of the linguistic inclusion.
Absolutely, yeah, the non-verbal communication and the simple lots of people think of communication as being talking to each other, but you're absolutely right, it is beyond that. It's the person getting a message, and just us being able to convey that message, whether that's through words or pictures. Absolutely. And yeah, the best practice from Alzheimer's and dementia training would be that the pictograms are the way to go, and they're much more useful for people to read and to get the message. Thank you, Dolores. Fermanagh Noma District Council website will be reviewed and edited in line with Linguistic Diversity Toolkit. So again, if we've got something that's very wordy on the website. We are looking for people to be aware that it should be quite simple and in line with the toolkit. So perhaps if we're doing surveys or policies, there should be easy read versions, and we can see some of those best practices popping up elsewhere. So the likes of some of the Department of Communities documents have all of those types of formats now. Then we have ensure that community consultation is central in the process of bilingual signage. So we're looking at if we're looking at, say, village signage, etc., we're looking at going out to the community and asking them, how do you feel about bilingual signage? Is it something that is wanted here? And that ties into the road naming policy that we have, and building control deals with all of those inquiries as well. Enhance good relations within the district through the celebration of minority languages. So elected representatives will be offered awareness and language training in Irish, Ulster Scots and other minority languages and cultures. And that can be rolled out to the staff members as well if there's interest there. Promote Irish and Ulster Scots and celebrate the significance of these languages in the history and culture of the district. So implement the Irish language policy. So implement the Irish language policy. The Irish language policy and strategy were reviewed last year, and we now have those in place. So they have their own action plans attached. I am one of the Irish language officers for Fermanagh and Omagh District Council, and we also have Kevin Goodwin. If you have any Irish language policy queries, you can contact gaeilge@fermanaghomagh.com, and I can send out that email, or you can just reply to the email that you got the link of this meeting from. Implement the Ulster Scots policy. We have an Ulster Scots champion within the council as well, and that's Tommy McLaughlin, and he is one of the Good Relations officers. He's the team lead for the Good Relations team within Fermanagh and Omagh District Council as well. Afford elected members the opportunity to use and access their language of choice whenever appropriate, while respecting others' identities and mindful of the Council's corporate responsibilities. So elected members may continue to request personal items of stationery, including business cards, according to personal preference. You can see that there are quite a few blank spots here. We are willing to, and very willing to add in any extra points here that you as staff members think we haven't covered some base or whatever. Please let us know. I'm more than happy to add in bits and pieces here as well.
Well, I suppose I'm kind of thinking, Fiona, where it's things that you've been involved with, which has been events that end up being bilingual events. So we've been doing the Irish language element for about the last decade with our European Heritage Open Days events, of usually trying to have some of those strands delivered in the Irish language. And then with the kind of combined Maguire history gathering and the, I'm going to say it wrong, Egshin Hernia.
You did very well there, yes, Bruna.
Thanks so much. Three entire years of schooling in Irish language and no ability whatsoever.
I think you did well.
Thank you. But having those events where some talks are delivered in both Irish and in English is quite helpful. I'm not sure if something similar is happening within Ulster Scots, but certainly within the Irish language. So in terms of those sorts of things, is the plan to keep those going?
Yes. Yeah, the plan is to keep those types of things going as they promote the Irish language, and similarly Ulster Scots has different outreach avenues and activities that they use to try and get the language out to our district and residents and visitors. for example, another example of like the minority languages is environmental health often get all of, say, I believe it's all the Chinese owners of restaurants, owners of Chinese restaurants into one workshop, and they have an interpreter there that is able to present the information that's relevant for those restaurants to be within the law on certain bits and pieces. Sorry, I don't work in environmental health, so I can't pretend to know all of the terms, but they put on a specific workshop for those because they're a major part of the restaurant life within the district, and they have tried this as an outreach forum in order to make sure that those residents of our district are being well served and they're not at any disadvantage within the district, that they're getting the same message as the English language restaurant owners as well. So absolutely, it's taking your message and thinking, who needs to hear this? And is there anybody within our district that isn't able to access this message because there's a language barrier there, or there's an unconscious barrier on the council's part, and it's not something that we are consciously putting there, but it might be something that we have unconsciously put in place, and it's a small barrier to us that we think people can easily overcome. But when you have several barriers always in your life, it's sometimes quite hard for somebody from a minority community to overcome even those smaller barriers, specifically with language.
Suppose, Fiona, I'm thinking from registration, and suppose to date has been mostly births, but down the line those people have been living here long enough that will be marriages and deaths. And like especially the Syrian community and Ukrainian and different people with maybe more diverse things that they've no documents for wherever they've had to flee from. And it's to go somewhere easily to have that translated, to make that not such an ordeal for them, that often they are coming and having to source maybe interpreters, because I know we've had a wee bit of an issue trying to get an interpretation service. I know Finbar's looking at that with procurement, but I just feel those things are ongoing, and I'm just waiting for the day somebody comes in and say, I should be receiving this service.
Absolutely.
And you know, they're maybe going through a traumatic enough time in their life, especially with the death, never mind trying to overcome the language barrier. And that's, I'm hoping this will solve or point us in the right direction for being able to go to one place to find how to access all these things, whether we're emailing them or whether we're, you know, conversing with them in person.
Absolutely, Hazel, and you've hit the nail on the head there. Whenever people are coming to registration, it's normally at a very emotional time, and often with births it's incredibly happy, and then unfortunately on the flip side with deaths it's an incredibly emotional time for the families involved as well. And again, the added stress of a linguistic barrier, we don't want a case of a young child having to translate for their parent. That's not fair on the child, it's not fair on the parent, and it's something that we don't feel is best practice, and it's not something that we would encourage either, which is why you've been working with Finbar so diligently in order to try and get an interpretation service that you can easily access. And again, this policy is to underpin that and to kind of put a pin in it and say, no, this is the standard that we expect, and we expect that there should be an interpretation service available whenever a customer or a visitor or resident comes in to our service. We expect that we can interpret for them as well. So yeah, I know it's a work in progress, Hazel, but this policy is there to underpin what you are aiming for. Absolutely.
Fiona, is the intention that these interpretation services, when required, where you're getting an interpreter in, for example, for a museum event, is there a separate pool of funds for this? I know from your smile, or is it to be
That would be an
taken from that?
ecumenical manner.
No.
Yes, so that would be a higher decision than I have control over. It would be a recommendation, definitely from an officer perspective, and I'm sure Matthew would be of the same opinion, because a lot of the corporate events would have to have sign language automatically, and I know that they've been working quite diligently on making sure that there are sign language interpreters available for those events. And yes, it would be something that is expected. The same with Hazel's interpretation service. That might be online, and especially now that lots of our meetings are more online, the interpreters are more likely to be on Teams, WebEx, Zoom, etc. So hopefully it will be very similar to what the NHS has, in that we will be able to just ring a number and tell them that we need an interpreter for whatever language, and then we'll line up the appointment, and the interpreter will be able to engage with the customer at that stage. For events, it's more on the officers, and it's something that we'll have to look at more closely, in that do we have to have a specific pot corporately for those interpreters, or should those interpretation costs be added on to the budgets that all officers are using? And that's something, again, that has to be discussed higher up the management chain.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions or any comments there?
Suppose, Fiona, will staff be expected to partake in learning sign language or Irish language or Ulster Scots? You know, is there, what if you have a member of staff said, no, I'm not interested, I have no language skills, or I just don't have any interest? Is there, you know, is that something that's going to be compulsory if you're working on the front line?
No, absolutely not. It is not going to be compulsory in any way at all. If you are, and I come across people quite often who are very adamant that they've learned one language, which is English, and they have no intention of learning any other language. And that's absolutely fine. You were not employed, and the you using other languages was not part of your employment contract. So therefore there's no pressure on you. However, we will put on classes if you have an interest in being able to make signs, very simple signs of hello, thank you, those types of communication signs. We are looking at possibly putting on classes for staff for those, and the same goes for Irish language. Very simplified greetings, hello, how are you, enough to get you to feel like it's a polite conversation starter, and then you can change over to English and say that you don't have Irish, etc. For future hires, it might be something that we wanted to include in the job descriptions. So as a desired, again, it may never be part of the essential criteria. It more than likely will be part of a desired criteria, particularly if we have an instance of a high migration into the district. So, for example, we've quite a few Syrian refugees that have come into the district. If we have reached a point where staff members or staff leaders in the Connect centres feel there should be a staff member that can speak and communicate easily with Syrians on the ground, that might be something they want to include in the job description and something that they're looking for. But it will not be retrospective. Current staff members won't be asked to start learning languages if they don't want to.
And I think my last question, instead of hogging it all,
go ahead.
Is, really the implementation plan. What sort of time scale, or when do you see all this really suppose kicking off and then having to be implemented? I see there's a review after 3 years.
Yes, yeah. So all policies are reviewed after 3 years. So we'll get this hopefully through council and a decision on it hopefully by October. So at that stage, I would hope that we would have made a good run at compiling that toolkit, that we'll have had meetings with registry, front of house in Connect centres, and also any of the other facilities like Marble Arch Caves, Enniskillen Castle, etc., or the forum and a lot of the sports centres as well, that we've had a chance to work collaboratively with those staff members in order to make this a useful toolkit, that it's something that they can absolutely put their hand to and find exactly the stages that they need to go through if something comes up, or it's part of their ongoing training, because those front of house staff members always have this type of training. It's just something extra. They're probably already doing it automatically. It's just naming the bits and pieces that we expect from them. So yeah, this should the toolkit, we are aiming for this financial year to have at least we're working towards the final draft. We should be able to do that within this final financial year. And everything else is more or less already what we are doing. It's just kind of quantifying it for people and making sure that it's very clear that it's attached to the linguistic diversity policy, and it's, you know, it's stuff that we unconsciously do anyway as part of trying to offer the best service we can to the people of the district.
One last question, Fiona. You were talking about all those accents being available from the keyboard. Are you talking about something more than the Alt-GR button and letter? It's something more complex?
Yeah, so it's, for example, so say the example I used earlier was a Bulgarian group, or perhaps choose a German group, because I know the umlaut is definitely in the German language. So if a German drama group started up in the district, and their name included an umlaut, then the Funnel and Investment Grants portal should be able to handle that umlaut coming up in their text and in their name. So whenever we download an Excel spreadsheet, it shouldn't turn into a load of different symbols with the percentage sign and the pound sign, etc., on there, because the computer systems don't talk to each other, if you get me. What we're looking for there is that the acute symbols, etc., do stay normal, and they don't destroy, they don't convert it, and it's just something that we're looking at ongoing.
So for example, I've been managing the Enniskillen Castle social media, and since that, when people reply to me in a language, I've gone and tried to figure out what language it is, and then Google Translate a reply to them in that language. And I am familiar, I didn't know the name of it, being an umlaut. It again?
Umlaut. I'm probably not pronouncing it either. I'm not pronouncing it properly either, but that's my best go at it, because I didn't study German.
Only that I can't find it on my keyboard, so I've always had to go back into the person's name to try and copy that in their name when I'm giving a reply, so it's included in it. Are you saying we're going to have that available now from our keyboard?
It's something that we're going to work with IT on, absolutely. I can't guarantee when we'll have that available. I do know we're accessing those characters is often easier on your phone, because if you have a council phone is the obvious verification there, or so if you hold down the letter, if you hold down the vowel, you will get your different accents come up. However, when you're using the keyboard on your desktop or your laptop, it is often quite hard and difficult to get the correct accent. Alt-GR and the vowel is quite easy, but otherwise it's quite difficult for some of the other accents to come up. And again, that's a conversation that we're having with IT to try and make sure that it's a bit easier.
Okay,
thank you. Character map, I use that character thing on the toolbar there, character. I'm trying to character map, and it brings up the symbols and just copy and paste them.
That's great. And that's a toolbar on your
See,
internet
just down
browser,
at the
Hazel?
bottom of your, down at the bottom left-hand side, the little search, type here to search. If you just go into character map, and then it'll bring up all the different symbols, and you can just select the symbol and copy and paste.
Okay.
I think it works. I know we use it for the General Register Office system, and it works, and I'm assuming it works on this as well.
I would use that quite frequently as well too, Fiona and Hazel. And I'm probably maybe a little bit more familiar with the the codes as well too. But I think, there are workarounds in it, aren't they? Even to draw up a little kind of glossary or dictionary off those shortcut codes from the keyboard and that as well. And then you just get used to doing them, I think, as well too.
Absolutely. So I use the Irish language ones quite often. So I'm just going to share with yourselves. This is an Irish language toolkit that I had put together for staff. It hasn't gone to anybody yet. But just to show you that this is something that I put together. And it's something that we can put together in this new toolkit as well for all of the other characters that we'd need if people are interested, although having an online tool like Character Map would be incredibly useful for folks as well. So that's a great suggestion, and thank you very much for letting me know about it, because I wasn't aware of it. It's something that we can maybe add in to our discussions with IT.
Yeah, and Fiona, I'm not too sure as well, and obviously it would depend, I'm very mindful of costs, of course, pending, how frequently it would be used, but you can actually get a different keyboard.
Yes.
Which, it might be quicker for people who are high frequency users as well too. Obviously not applicable for everyone, but, for those especially on the front line who are maybe...
Absolutely. That's definitely something. If it's something that's useful to registry in particular, that's something that we could take a look at. I know myself and Kevin have had access to online Irish language software, so we've been able to download spell check in Irish into our Word documents and our any of the Microsoft programs. So that's absolutely available. So it's something that we can take a look at as well. Any other questions or suggestions there, folks? Because that's really helpful, the characters and the keyboards. No, we're all very quiet. Okay. If anybody comes up with anything, feel free to email me at fiona.crudden@fermanaoma.com. If you want to reply as a member of the public, you're more than welcome to. I believe the survey link is in the email that I sent out to all staff. And if you want to reply in a longer form than just the survey that we sent out, you're very welcome to do that. The consultation does close at 5 p.m. on Friday, the 8th of July. So please try and get your ideas down on paper or in an email to myself before then, preferably. If you're a couple of weeks late, they'll probably be included as well. But the implementation plan is something that we're looking to make as useful as possible to members of staff. We just don't want it to be stuck on the server or on the staff hub and people kind of scoff at it. We want it to be something that is practical and useful to new members of staff and to present members of staff as well. So that is all I have to say to you. Thank you very much for attending. Again, let me know if you have any questions that come up or occur to you later on. Thanks, folks. Slán.
Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Fiona.